I started taking piano lessons in 1959 when I was 7 years old. My mother would relate at different times through the years, "You couldn't even read yet when you started taking lessons from Sister Letitia." Sister Letitia intimidated me. In those days, Catholic nuns all still wore the habit. I was a Protestant kid, so I really had no experience with Catholic sisters. My mother loved to tell about the time that I asked a kid, "Are you Catholic or public?" I apparently made only school and not religious distinctions. My father was a highly intelligent man, a chemical and mechanical engineer by trade. When he started out in his career, engineers didn't have to have any certifications or license. We lived in Ohio in the 1950s, and when they began to license professional engineers, he could have been grandfathered in based on his experience. He chose instead to study and take the state exam so that he could earn the official state credentials as a professional engineer. This was the kind of meticulous person that he was. When I was about 9 years old, my father made a proposal to me. "Kathy, if you learn to play Clair de Lune and the Minute Waltz in a minute on the piano, I will buy you a baby grand piano," he offered. Now, I didn't even know what a baby grand piano was, but could tell by the tone in which the offer was made that it must be something special. As I remember back on it now, he also had old copies of the sheet music for both pieces. I didn't question why he had the music, why he wanted me to learn these particular two pieces, nor did he ever offer any explanation. From time to time, I would look at the sheet music, but both pieces seemed beyond my abilities. I was never a natural talent, and like most kids, wasn't all that interested in practicing. Daddy did not show any other interest in my piano skills. He didn't listen to me practice, offer advice, or any tips, and did not proudly invite me to play for company. Now, this was a good thing as far as I was concerned. I had performance anxiety and didn't want to play for anyone anyway. From time to time, my mother would twist my little skinny arm, figuratively, of course, and get me to play for guests. This made me a nervous wreck. She played by ear, and every great once in a while would play something, but other than that, neither of my parents played piano. One day, the stakes changed. "Kathy, if you will learn to play Clair de Lune and the Minute Waltz in a minute, I'll buy you a VW Beetle when you're 16 instead of the piano," Daddy offered. I was about 14 at the time, and like most 14-year-olds, was anxiously awaiting the coveted driver's license. Now you're talking, a car of my own. This was a prize that might motivate me. A VW Beetle was a very popular little car in the 60s, and no teens I knew in those days were given new cars at 16. Even now that I'm in my 50s, the Beetle is popular. Oh, but there was still the pesky problem of those two pieces of music. I never viewed this challenge as one that I could attain. I must admit, though, that I really never seriously tried to achieve it. In reality, the music might not have been beyond my capabilities if I had exerted enough effort, but I didn't want to work that hard. I didn't take the music to my piano teacher and ask for help in learning. I wonder now why my father never suggested that to me. As serious as I ever got about it was bragging to my friends what my father had offered. I don't recall they were terribly impressed. I was an obedient little girl, though, and I wanted to please the adults in my life, especially my father. I thought he was the smartest man ever. He knew about everything. If he didn't know the answer to my questions, which was rare, he'd find out and come back later with the answer. I wanted to do the things he did. He loved to order frankfurters and fried clams and pistachio ice cream at Howard Johnson's when we traveled, and so I ordered those things too. I learned as a young child from my Bostonian father to love Boston brown bread, Indian pudding with vanilla ice cream from Durgan Park, steamed clams in the shell, and steaked on the grill, charred on the outside and rare on the inside. When I suggested that my mother could make a spice rack out of a hymnal rack from the back of an antique church bench that she used on our front porch, he acted like I was the smartest kid in the world. Being an engineer, he even taught me to use a slide rule, although I didn't have that much need for that particular skill as a kid. I wanted to please my father, but how could I ever learn those two pieces of music? I remembered that it worried me. And how could I get a car? It turns out, however, that I didn't have to wrestle with this dilemma for too long. On November 4th, 1966, soon after the offer of a shiny new car was made, my father died. He had a massive heart attack while changing two flat tires on his car at work during his lunch hour. He never made it to the hospital. At the time, I was taking piano and organ lessons from a teacher in the neighborhood. I had agreed to take lessons from her because she didn't require her students to play in a recital. I had refused to be subjected any longer to months of anxiety worrying about an upcoming recital. When my father died, my mother and I moved from Charleston, West Virginia, back to her hometown, Louisville, Kentucky. I refused to take piano lessons any longer. My mother, people later, she was just too grieved over her father's death to take lessons anymore. She just never played again. The truth of the matter was, I didn't want to play any longer, and I used my father's death as an excuse to quit. I knew it then, although would not have admitted it, and I know it now. There was no sentimental connection between my father and my piano playing. It really was not something we shared, with the exception of the unexplained, mysterious, and, on my part, dreaded goal. It was many years later, when I could look back as an adult, that I realized that I'd carried guilt with me through the years over both using his death as an excuse to quit taking piano lessons, as well as failing to achieve the goal he set for me. I had disappointed my daddy, whose approval I always strived to win as a little girl. As an adult, I made half-hearted attempts to get back to the piano, perhaps subconsciously wanting to make right what I'd failed to do before. My mother gave me my childhood piano, and occasionally I'd sit down and try to play something or vow to myself that I'd start practicing again, but I never did it. I pushed the Minute Waltz issue to the mostly forgotten memories of my childhood. But there would come a day, 27 years later, when quite unexpectedly, new pieces of the Minute Waltz puzzle would be revealed.